and jump in and get started. I want to thank you all for being here. I thank you for taking half an hour on a weeknight to join us and to talk a little bit more about this. I'll tell you a little bit about where the title of the webinar came from. Every year we talk to families who in July, August, September, we all hear the version of the same thing. They thought they had their costs covered, and then other costs start rolling in. And by the time the tuition bills hit, most families are not super surprised. There might be a little bit of sticker shock. They've been looking at how they're going to cover things. They have a sense of what the general tuition, room and board, meal costs will be. But what does surprise them is that later, as the school year starts progressing, they start to see additional expenses come up. So that's the piece that we're really here to cover tonight. I'm not here to talk a ton about the cost of college. Rather, this is really a walkthrough of all of the other costs that show up in between paying tuition. And then that first midterm is when some of these other expenses start to roll in. So that's really where we'll spend a majority of our time today. Please feel free to use the chat if questions are coming up. I am monitoring chat, so I will do my best to navigate that as I move through this. So let me show you what we're actually going to cover over the course of our time together today. So 3 things that we really plan to cover, and they'll all build on each other. First is what's actually in what I'm calling your second budget. So the first budget, again, tuition, meal plan, room and board, all of those types of things. We're really going to dig into what's in this second budget. Then we'll dive into the timing of everything, when these pieces first arrive. And then third, and this is the part that I'm probably going to spend a bit more time on with you, is how you find these real numbers. I'm not going to give you the numbers I've come up with. I really want you to be able to walk through specifically what those numbers look like for your individual situation. I could stand up here and give you national averages. You would write them down and they would be wrong for you and your family. Averages describe everybody and nobody. And so I really think it's important that you drill in on how you find your own numbers for your own budget, and we'll talk about how to find those. And I want to be very straightforward with you. At the end of this, I will spend a couple of minutes talking about what Ascent does, because sometimes there's still a gap after everything else, and Ascent does offer solutions to help cover those gaps. But before we get into it, by way of chat, because I'm having some technical difficulties and I don't know that I will be able to navigate to our polls, I would love to just see from you all, what's in your plan? What have you already budgeted for? And what are the things that maybe you haven't thought about? So feel free to take a look at what I'm showing here on the screen and throw some stuff into the chat. What have you already planned for? What feels new to you, kind of looking at this list? And maybe there are things that aren't even on this list. I'd love to just get a sense from you and who I'm talking to, what specifically you have already thought about in your budget. I don't see anyone dropping anything into the chat here. But there you go. Great. Seeing a couple things start to come in. Looks like most folks have thought about meals and housing, books and equipment. Some folks maybe don't have a plan totally baked out yet. Great. What I'm seeing come into the chat is honestly what I expect. Most folks have thought about tuition, fees, housing, and a meal plan. Probably also a bit of books and equipment. I'm not seeing a lot of folks who have maybe thought about travel expenses, getting to and from school, maybe campus fun and connection. And that's totally normal. And I really want to normalize that for everybody. And that's part of the reason we do this session here in August. it's not because you're doing anything wrong or you haven't thought about this. It's something that I see happen every single year when I host discussions like this. Um, there are a few different categories that maybe folks haven't thought of yet. So that's really where we're going to spend a majority of our time today. Again, you've already started to build the plan. I want to pressure test that, build a couple more things into it with you so that you feel really prepared by the time you are into the semester. So again, you've already built this first budget. What most families plan for: tuition, housing, room and board, meal plans, books and supplies. I will spend a little bit more time today talking about books and supplies. There are a couple of different things in books and supplies that might not be totally tallied up yet. You probably have estimates from different documents you've seen online, maybe your cost of attendance, the cost of attendance you've seen published. Um, but there's a lot here that I want to drill into, and a lot really outside of this that I'm going to drill into today. Um, it's this whole kind of idea of this second budget that comes up. It shows up one piece at a time. It often shows up when you aren't thinking about money. And so my goal for you today is to walk away with a little bit of a plan, a little bit of a budget, something you can use as guidance to plan for. So we're going to work on building together what's maybe missing from your overall plan. And the first thing to understand is, again, it doesn't arrive all at once. So here's where we are. We are looking at your calendar year wide open. So really thinking about August through June or so. Most families brace for August. August is the one that most people see coming. They know that the tuition and room and board will be due. But then there's also a first wave that hits. This first wave is maybe some of the stuff you've started thinking about. It is move-in if you're doing on-campus housing. It is the car or parking or transit if a car is not allowed on campus. It's the boxes. It's all of the things that kind of come with moving onto campus. If you're not moving onto campus, this might be your first round of books, equipment, fees, lab expenses, things like that. And then there is the second wave. This second wave hits around October or November. And it's really kind of those mid-semester and midterm breaks. You also see that hit again in December and January. You've got midterm breaks, you've got semester breaks. All of those things then hit again in the second semester. So not as big, not as impactful usually in the spring. So you might see some additional class expenses as you head into January, February, as your second semester starts ramping up. Again, you'll hit a spring break and a summer break. And those are the things that, again, people are not necessarily planning for, but they do come up. Oops, I lost some stuff here. Let's bring those back in. There we go. And then finally, the piece I'm going to talk about and that really runs underneath that all is what I call the belonging ripple. This is one that families don't always account for, and it never really stops. It kind of runs the entirety of the year. And we'll come back to that because it's important. And it's probably a little more important than it might look or than you might think. Um, and here's kind of why the timing matters and why I want to really break this all down and why I'm giving you this idea of when things are going to hit. $1,000 that you know about now that you can plan for feels really different than $1,000 you didn't account for in October. If it's October and you're looking at coming up with that money, it can feel more like a crisis than it can be something that you plan for. So if you know about it now, you can plan for it. It's the same number, but it feels like a different experience. So let's take some time to start breaking all of this down so you can plan for it. And we're going to start with the one that's going to hit first. This is this first wave, the move in and the first few weeks of classes. So I'll start with the one, like, as you think about moving onto campus, this is the one that always feels a little weird for people. I shared because I lived on a campus back in the day, but I've worked on college campuses for a number of years. Um, Extra long twin sheets. Unless you've been there before, most people don't know that dorm beds are longer than beds at home. So you have to buy special sheets. Schools are getting better about sharing that type of messaging and sharing that type of info. But without fail, when I used to work on a college campus, I would see it happen every year. Families heading out to the local Target to buy new sheets because they showed up with the wrong size. I lead with the sheets because it's funny, it's anecdotal, but it's also kind of this whole pattern in miniature. Most of your expenses, they may not be that expensive, but some just feel a little bit invisible. They maybe feel like you can't totally conceptualize them until you're standing in the room or you're there on campus. It's the thing like hangers, organizers, groceries. And again, maybe you've planned for most of these. You read through your checklists, but then there might be some unexpected class expenses. So things like access codes for online homework platforms or labs or studio fees, things like this may catch you off guard. Maybe you're smart, maybe you're budget savvy. So you plan to buy a used textbook to save some money. You feel good about that choice. And then you discover that the homework platform requires a code that only comes with the new book. It's this type of little unknown stuff that comes up that really catches you in the first wave. There are a couple of ways to prep for it. If you haven't yet, check your housing portal or your new student checklists. Most schools publish room and bed dimensions. They also have a comprehensive list of what's already in the room versus what you need to purchase. I then recommend, if they're available, checking course catalogs or syllabi. You might be able to access them before the term starts. Um, Even if you can only pull one or two of them in August, knowing what books and materials are genuinely required can be really helpful. Also, if you haven't already had a conversation with your roommate, now is a great time to do that. You can plan for one mini fridge, one lamp, etc. Just this quick conversation can save you some money and some time, so that you're not having to kind of scramble to return unneeded items. So that's the first wave. Again, most people see some of this coming. You've maybe already planned for it. But then there's another wave that you'll see hit a month or two later. I hear so many families that share that they didn't think about travel home, and that usually hits in October or November. Folks may not budget for that trip home because it doesn't feel like a college cost. But if your student is far enough away to fly or maybe drive, train, bus, gas, all of those things can get expensive. And so Thanksgiving is one I always flag for families. It feels particularly challenging. It can be such an expensive time to travel. It feels like the whole country is trying to get home in that same 48 hours. So pricing that flight now instead of late October often makes a meaningful difference. And it costs you nothing to look now. It can also help you make choices about whether or not you do or don't travel home. A number of schools offer opportunities to do Thanksgiving with friends, or folks from the university. So again, just want to open up the conversation, provide some options for you all. There are also some other kind of variable costs that show up over the course of the semester and over the course of the year. Things like flex dollars, laundry, the pharmacy run, snacks. Individually, again, these things are small. Nobody really writes them down. Nobody really plans for them, but they can add up. On a practical note, I will share that most dining plans and flex dollars on campuses, you can add to them over the course of the term. So some families like to build in that small cushion. They can then take that money and use it towards flex dollars. And if they end up not using it towards flex dollars or dining money, you can use it elsewhere, or roll it over into the next semester. One more that surprises people, particularly if you're a student moving from a different climate, is that you might need different clothes. I know that sounds kind of silly, but I always remember my nephew calling me in November or so, maybe October, his freshman year, asked me if I could ship him a jacket. He had spent most of his life growing up in, warm areas in Ecuador and Costa Rica, but he got a scholarship to a school in Iowa. And while he was in Iowa, he didn't realize he would need a true winter coat in the dead of winter. His light jacket wasn't cutting it. I happen to have friends and live in a place where we have a big outdoor gear company. We can get stuff at a discount. So he wanted me to get him something and ship it, that was appropriate for the freezing temperatures. But again, looking for that friends and family discount. So Um, and, there are other things that live outside of this wave one and two, things that live outside of your semester costs. So let's take a look at those now. Um, it's the semester breaks. Something that many students are surprised by is that the dorm is not open all year. It is open for parts of the year when the class is in session. Um, and sometimes those gaps belong to you to figure out. Winter break can run anywhere from 2 to 8 weeks, depending on the school. Summer is, 3 to 4 months. And that's a real stretch of time when rooms may be closed. You may also see that dining halls are closed during that time as well. And so, during that time, you may be responsible for being off campus. In the summer, in particular, moving all of your belongings out of the dorms is something that you have to account for and cover for. And storage is a piece that people learn the hard way. Everything a student owns in the summer has to be out of the building, usually at move out. And if home is a flight away, you can't always bring everything with you. So it goes into a storage unit or is something that is returned or maybe part of the dorm, but something that you have to then buy again next August. So I've seen some students manage this proactively really well, using spring break travel to take home a couple of loads of stuff they don't need anymore to make packing and shipping lighter in May. Another surprise that sometimes comes up is that if you're moving off campus for the next year, you may need to cover things like housing deposits for rentals. Those are things that may come up, in spring before any summer earnings exist. And so I'd recommend looking at some housing info. Not all dorms close for the winter. Many are open, but again, some students are caught off guard when the dorms are closed for the winter. So it's all just stuff to make sure that you get informed about. You can talk to the housing office. You can look on your portal. I think your housing contract often has that type of information. But I'd really look at drilling in for specific information about dorm closures and dates when things need to be moved out to prepare. You can also ask about options to stay during breaks if there are accommodations. So those are the three big waves. And then there's this fourth wave that kind of runs all year long. When I used to work on a college campus, my job was really focused on first year experience and helping students stay engaged and connected. And one part of the college budget that often gets overlooked is what I call this kind of like life happens or belonging category. You've got things like club dues. Maybe it's like a friend's birthday dinner or a bus to get to an away game, tickets to a campus event, or maybe a late night food run after studying with friends. It might be $20 here, $30 there. And these expenses can feel optional. So they are often the first thing families leave out of the budget. But some of the most meaningful parts of the college experience happen in moments like these. They are opportunities for students to build friendships, find communities, try new things, and create a sense of belonging on campus. So as you're planning, I encourage you to think about whether there's room, even just occasionally, for these types of experiences. The goal is not to fund every activity or say yes to every invitation. It's simply to create a little bit of flexibility so that you, if you're the student, or your student, if you're, a parent, can participate in the moments that matter most to them. So I'm not going to tell you what number belongs in this category. This is a highly individual category because every family situation is so different. But what I will suggest is putting something in this category, even if it's very modest. When that money has already been planned for, students can, say yes to more opportunity, and a very small amount can go a long way. College success is not just about academics, it's also about connection, confidence, finding your place, building your network for the future. So if you can build a little room in the budget for those experiences, it can be a meaningful investment in the overall journey. So that is essentially everything that's kind of covered in the second budget. Now I want to show you a little bit more about when the money to pay for it actually shows up, because this is one of the mechanics that seems to catch a lot of families off guard. So while this slide is much more mechanical and less about unbudgeted items, I do think it's worth discussing so that you have a plan in place. Most families assume that financial aid arrives and then you go buy what you need, but it's not always that linear or seamless in practice. Sometimes aid gets applied to what you owe first, things like tuitions, fees, housing, and whatever is left over might come back as a refund. And that refund is what some families are counting on for books, groceries, in the first couple of weeks of living. However, it can take a week or two before funds release. It's not the school's fault. It's not because they're slow or something's broken. Sometimes it really is just a matter of that's how it goes, and that's the way that it works. The schools need time to process everything, and so sometimes I hear about families feeling stretched during the first week or two. And it's not really because they're overspending or they have bad planning in place. It's just a calendar mismatch that they didn't know about. I'd make a couple of recommendations to plan for this time. Call your school offices. You may be able to reach your financial aid or bursar's office. You can ask about when refunds typically process, and they might be able to give you an estimate. But while you have them on the phone, if this is something you're concerned about, you can ask about whether they offer a book advance or emergency funds. I've worked with so many schools who have systems and aid in place to help cover the gaps. You just have to ask. And then when your refund processes, you pay back. So we've talked about a couple of things together. Let's start to put it all together. Um, if you screen grab, take a picture of one slide tonight, I would make it this one. When I started pulling all of this info together, I started to compile national averages to share with you, but those are so unhelpful when it helps student situations because they're so individual. So I put together my checklist of things to look into. When I work with students, these are the things that I talk to them and their families about. And this can be your research starting point. Check housing portals, student checklists, syllabi, library, set up flight trackers, talk to campus offices to get an idea of your individual picture. If you have access to current students, talk to them. They're a great resource. They have tons of great information. If you don't know any current students, ask an admissions advisor to connect you with an ambassador or find an admitted students group. Students have the inside scoop and they can share info that isn't published online. I'd also mention that AI tools are worth, taking a look at. If you give your school name or even some of the lists, you can ask it to build a packing and cost list. I'd always check it against what the school has actually published, but it can be a good starting point. And it takes seconds versus, an hour to organize all of it. So let's start to put this all together. Um, I'm going to give you a bit of a blueprint on what to do next. And after we wrap here, sometime this week, take a moment or two to start mapping these costs out for yourself. So take a little bit of time and plug in your moving and class costs. So the things that are going to hit in the first wave. Then start to sketch out your midterm breaks, then your semester breaks, and then get your belonging plan in place as well. Rough is genuinely fine. I would rather you have a number written down that you're not sure about than leaving the number blank. We don't need to be precise. You'll probably revise this again anyway, but these numbers here that I have on the screen are rough. Yours might be a little more. They could be half. It's totally dependent on your situation. Once you add all of that up, I would encourage you to think about adding in an additional 15% to get to your kind of true buffer. This buffer is to help you plan for the unexpected. You drop your phone in the water, you have to change your flight. These things will come up, so you should plan for it. And when you have your number, hang on to it because that's kind of what we're going to look at next. So here is why the buffer number matters beyond just being kind of a nice exercise. When most families start calculating what they need, they start with tuition and room and board. They subtract their aid, and they call whatever is left the gap. But what they're missing in that is the cost we've just spent the last 20 minutes on, right? Those are real and they belong in that calculation. If you leave them out of you'll think that your gap is smaller. So, it's not a scary observation. It's a practical one. It is, let me see here. I'm getting an alert. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything that folks are. There's a Q&A. Great. I'll get to the Q&A. So, sorry. When you're looking at kind of like funding that gap, there are a few different options you can look at. I always say free money first. Scholarships don't stop when you enroll. Departmental awards, outside scholarships, opportunities that you might become eligible for once you declare a major. You can continue looking for scholarships throughout your entire college journey. Then you might be looking at the money you already have, money you earn, and and a payment plan. Um, so a payment plan is something that most families overlook. It is something that schools might offer that allow you to spread the balance at little or no cost. And then last, borrowing. So most families end up using some combination of all four of these. And as we get ready to wrap today, I do want to tell you a little bit more about private student loans. So for some families, after scholarships, grants, federal aid, and whatever they can contribute, there's still a balance. And that's what Ascent does. Ascent offers private education loans for school certified costs. We do that in a few different ways because not all families are shaped the same way. We have loan options for students borrowing with a cosigner, options for parents or sponsors to cosign or, to borrow themselves. So keeping the student off the loan entirely. And an option for students who don't have a cosigner available, which it looks specifically at academic progress and future earning potential rather than only at credit history. The last one exists because it's an alternative for students who may not have a cosigner option. But if you're looking at borrowing as an option, it's important to look at how much you genuinely need to borrow, not how much you can get approved for. Those are very different numbers, and the gap in between can cost real money over years. So whether you look at us or somebody else, my goal is that you understand, different eligibility requirements, what repayment looks like after graduation, and the total cost of the life of the loan. And with Ascent, you can look at what you would qualify for with a soft credit inquiry, which doesn't affect your credit score. So that means you can get real information before committing to anything. But whatever you decide, whether you need private funding or not, I want to make sure you leave with something useful. So I want you to walk away with some clear actions and some helpful resources. You don't have to solve all of this tonight, but there are three things worth maybe doing this week if you haven't already done so, and they should hopefully take less than an hour. So first, go look up your real numbers. Everything we've talked about tonight should be published somewhere on your school site, or it's, maybe a quick Google Flights search. You just have to know it's there, and go find it. And then second, add all those things up. Add the 15%. Again, it's rough, but that's fine. You'll revise the number over time. You'll start to get a sense of what this looks like, the longer you're in school. And third, and this is the one that kind of changes things, put that number next to your aid letter and available money and resources. Most families compare aid to tuition, but compare it to your tuition plus everything else we've covered here, and you'll see where your real gap is instead of just a partial one. So as you're building all of this out, consider reaching out to your school, getting clarity on the things that might be fuzzy. And finally, a couple of resources to share with you. We have so many tools and resources. We publish new ones regularly. All of them can help you navigate college success and college finances. So the code on the left is something you can scan, bookmark, and come back to. We also have scholarships available. So the QR code on the right is evergreen. We have new scholarships that go live all of the time. We're currently running our 10K summer giveaway, but we do have scholarships year round. Again, check that one out, bookmark it, come back to it. You can apply anytime. And I just want to say thank you all for your time. Thank you for being here with me. I'm going to stop sharing and get into the Q&A. I know that we are over time, but I do want to make sure. Yes. So there's a question here. I would like to ask if students who are outside of the US are qualified to apply for a loan as long as as long as cosigners are in the US. There are loan options available for folks who have sponsorship inside the US. There might also be options, available through other lenders for folks who maybe are outside of the US and don't have sponsorship from the US. Are there other questions I can answer? Where can we access a site where we can plug in our costs? How do scholarships and grants change the way I pay? I've got a couple more questions here. I do want to make sure I'm able to get to some of these. I may not be able to answer these questions right here and right now due to time constraints. Um, so where you can plug in your costs, I do have some calculator resources I can share with you all after today's webinar. And then how do scholarships and grants change what I pay? For that specific question, there is a webinar that we did, gosh, back in June or so that really broke some of that down. So what I will do is post webinar, I'll work with my team on sharing out some of those resources to folks who attended today. Thank you all so much for your time. If there are any other questions, please feel free to drop them in. I may not be able. Yes, I will at someone is asking to see the screen where we shared the QR codes. Let me put that back up for you here for one more moment. There we go. We will also share these resources, and you'll have access to the recording of the webinar. We will send that out um, kind of with like a wrap up of everything so that you can access all of these things. Again, feel free to scan and bookmark. You can apply for scholarships year round and you can apply multiple times as well. Thank you all so much for your time. Great questions. Thank you for your engagement. I hope this was helpful. And again, we'll follow up with additional resources. Thank you so much.